Now, our first presenter, I am excited to announce, Dr. Lucretia Berry will be coming to us to lay the framework for today, to make sure we are all on the same page with definitions as we dive into this work and all of the topics that we are going to hear. Dr. Lucretia Berry is the founder of Brownicity, Many Hues, One Humanity, an agency dedicated to advocacy, education, and support for racial healing and anti-racism. Brownicity's learning community hosts thousands of learners committed to an anti-racism learning journey. She is a wife to Nathan and a mother of 3 little girls. A former college professor, she is learning to courageously create the world for which she is designed. Lucretia designed the popular beginner's course and authored the accompanying study guide, What Lies Between Us, fostering first steps towards racial healing. She is the anti-racism curriculum specialist for Community School of Davidson, a contributor for Encourage.me, a TEDx and Q Ideas speaker, and a senior consultant for Point Made Learning's The American Dream Game. Lucretia and her family get to be a part of the amazing community that is Mosaic Church Charlotte. She finds joy in prayer, dark chocolate-covered almonds, and dancing. Lucretia earned her PhD in curriculum and instruction and MA in English from Iowa State University and her BA from South Carolina State University. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Lucretia Berry.
Good morning, everybody. Look at all these beautiful faces, though hidden behind masks. I can still see your eyes. And so if you do me a favor, like make your eyebrows and your eyes very animated so I can get that. Yes, and nodding the head. Thank you. Yes, I can get that since I can't see you, but thank you for having me. Okay, so apparently, well, this is my second time. I got to be here last year for the Charlotte Justice Conference. I'm so grateful and honored to be asked to be here. And apparently last year I did such a great job that they told me to come back and do it again. So if you've heard this before, you can zone out if you heard it last year, because I'm gonna do this again. Oh, here's my clicker, right? Okay, let's see if I know how to do this. I'm imagining that green means go. Hey, that works. This is my family, also known as the Berry Patch. It's my husband, Nathan. I know, right? Somebody called us that, and it just stuck because we're the Berries, the Berry Patch. And we have 3 girls, ages, 10, 13, and in a few days, 9. Earlier this year, we got to visit Havana, Cuba, and we had an amazing time. But it's just, we felt very fortunate that, Cuba was still open earlier this year, and to be able to take our kids there and to be immersed in, to have the conversations about Cuba and America and the United States and, the politics and socialism and capitalism, but it's great to be in it and to have these conversations with our daughters. And then I think as a result, our oldest one she's all in on Spanish stuff. It's great. It's great. Okay, so yes, I wrote this book designed a course called What Lies Between Us, and it is specifically for newcomers. I have a heart for the beginner, and some people might say, well, what's a beginner? Because don't we all know about race and racism? Haven't we heard of it? Doesn't everyone know what it is? And so yes and no, right? So I remember being a graduate student, and as graduate students, oftentimes you get the opportunity to teach. And as a graduate student, we would teach courses, we would teach undergrad courses. And somehow I would always get, quote unquote, stuck with teaching the freshmen, because people prefer to teach, the sophomore and more senior classes. And somehow I always got left out of the meeting when we get to choose the course, I don't know how that conveniently happened. So by the time they say, oh, well, this is all we have left. You teach the freshman courses. And, I was offended, not at teaching the freshman courses, but I was offended of being left out. But I loved teaching the freshmen. Like, I loved connecting to people, or these young people at the beginning of this new undertaking of college. And so this is what I do. Like, in our first classes, I'd start asking them questions. And think about it, when you're in high school, or when you've gone to kind of the typical public school or had the typical, I'll just say, American school experience, you really are fed a lot of information, and then you regurgitate that information, right? So a lot of kids who are coming to college, they, feel like they did a great job at getting this information and regurgitating this information. And so they earned their way to college. And so we would have these freshmen who already thought that they knew everything. Like, I was in honors this and honors that, when I was in high school, and I graduated at the top of my class, and I was so special. And so then I would actually engage them in thinking, which was a new process for a lot of them. I would ask them questions, and then when they would answer, I'd ask them more questions, and then I would question their questions, and then we'd have all these questions, and then they'd be exposed to analysis, something that was new to them. And one of the most favorite response was this young freshman. He's Asian, and he just throws his hands up in the air, and he's like, I don't know what I know anymore. I just don't know, I don't know. And I'm like, and now you're ready. Now you're ready for college. Now you're ready to learn and to participate in a process of learning. And yes, and it's like that with race and racism. It's very significant and complex and nuanced. And it is the only, I think, you can correct me, but this is just from what I've observed in my long time on this earth, that it's like the only, or one of the only complex topics that touch every aspect of our lives. Especially in our country, we live it, it impacts us, it's nuanced, there's levels, but we don't learn about it. We just experience. We don't get to participate in a formal learning process. So, like, a learning process is language, processing, organizing, higher order thinking. Many of us experience it, and we experience it in different ways. And so it's like this, it's the only topic where we're like, okay, we have these different experiences, we've experienced it different ways. Let's get together and dismantle it. Or let's get together and solve the problems that it causes. There's no other significant, important topic that we do that way. Think about it. I like to use the example of math. Okay, how do we learn about math? Math is something that is significant. Math is something that is important. It touches all of our lives, and it impacts us in all different kinds of ways. And so think about it. How do you learn about math? When do you start learning about math? Probably most of us when we're, toddlers or whatever, probably before that. 1, 2, 3, right? Right? Okay. And then maybe before you go to school, I don't know, but let's just say you actually go to school, and then there is a curriculum, right? There are lessons that teach you, like, facts and figures and patterns of math, right? So you learn 1 + 1 is 2. They say it 2. 2, that's right, right? And you learn, like, primary numbers. What's the other one? When it's not a primary, it's a what? Okay, composite. I just believe them because I don't know. Composite. closet, right? So see, we learn these facts, we learn figures, we learn patterns. You know, my daughter, she'll ask me for help with math homework, and I'm like, okay, I haven't done this in so long, but I sit there and I learn the pattern. And I'm like, all you gotta do is learn this pattern, and you apply this pattern over and over and over again. Because I learned how to learn about math, right? So you get to a certain level, you go from elementary school, then you go to middle school, and that middle school, that's when you're doing like, you can correct me because I haven't been in school in a long time, algebra, right? And then, or advanced math, whatever it is, and then you're in high school and you're doing calculus, right? Things like that. Some of y'all looking at me like, nope, but you know what I mean. So there is a process, there is scaffolding, there is step by step. It's formal. We pretty much know, I didn't go to school and learn math, a whole different math language than somebody else over here, right? So then we come together in a company to be engineers, we're like, even when you're in a different country, right, you're still learning the same math. Like, we're not learning different math because it's complex and it's nuanced and it impacts every area of our lives, okay? So, but that's not the case with race and racism. So how is it that we actually learn, or I call them these popular learning processes? How is it that we then learn about race and racism? Well, we have the colorblind approach, right? That's an interesting way of addressing it, right? As if we don't see it, we'll just pretend we don't see it, and that way it'll go away. How's that work for anything? If you pretend it doesn't exist, if you pretend that you don't see that I'm brown. And the funny thing about the colorblind approach is that unless you're literally colorblind, like you can't tell blue from green or red from orange, it's a lie, really, because we can see that we look differently. Like, by the time children are 3 months old, like when our daughters were 3 months old, right, they knew that mommy looked differently than daddy. So it's just human. We see differences. And so to pretend that we don't is not helpful. But it's also, at the root of it, it's great in theory that, we'd be able to treat everyone the same or equally, regardless of their ethnic, racial background. But it's just not our reality right now. And so to pretend that these differences don't exist and differences in how we treat each other don't really help us move forward. And honestly, it's an appeal, it's a moral appeal, really is to say, I'm not racist. For the most part, sometimes I do hear people of color say, I am colorblind, but rarely do I hear that. I usually hear that about children. I usually hear that from people from the white racial category, I'm colorblind, which really means I'm not racist. Or it's applied to children. Children don't see color. Children are colorblind. That's not true, let me tell you. Children see color. But what's happening is they're not talking about it in your house because you're not talking about it in your house. You're not giving them language. You're not giving them framework. You're not giving them a permission to have these conversations. So what happens when I go to the school and read a book and have a conversation? Oh, the box opens and they have a lot to say. They have plenty to say. Or worse, they talk about it in terrible ways to each other, and then I get called in to fix it. Okay, so yes, the children see color, we see color. Another way is selectively skewed history. So the United States has always been a multi-ethnic space, okay? So even before Europeans got here, there were multiple tribes. So people have been living here and are different from each other and contributing to the beauty of this continent. And then we have had people come from other continents and countries and contribute as well. However, if you had a standard kind of United States school education, you got a focus on European history, conquest, and colonization only. Okay, which of course leaves you at a disadvantage and a huge deficit, because that means you're ahistorical and there's so much that we don't know. And yes, so we come to try to address a problem or an issue sitting in the deficit of being ahistorical and not knowing not knowing a fuller history of how we've gotten here and where we are. Another way, which is pretty popular, that people choose to, put in the place of learning, or this is how where they get their education from about race and racism, is through human interest stories. And let me tell you, our stories are important. Your story is important, my story is important. But it does not, and it cannot it doesn't stand alone without context. And so then, in the right context, it works. But what happens is a lot of people just use one story to be informed about how race and racism work. So that would be like, let's just, for example, say, my white husband were to say, well, I'm married to a black woman, so there is no racism. That's not true, right? And my white husband will tell you, he will be the first to tell you, that even though he's married to me, a black woman, he is still on an anti-racism journey and still has to check his biases, because it's a reality, right? It's in the air we breathe. It's in the water we drink, right? He has these beautiful brown daughters, and he still is very honest about checking his biases and being in a process of learning and dismantling. Okay, or it would be like we say, we've heard this, well, we had a black president. Or, Oprah's a billionaire, so there is no racism. Or sometimes I'll hear this about my story. Well, you have a doctorate, Seems like you did pretty well. What's wrong with the other people? Okay, so, this is what we can't do, right? Can't take this one person's story, right, and make it applicable to the facts, the figures, and the patterns, right, that are telling us a fuller story, or true story. And then there are the catastrophic events on the news, and I think it's great that more and more we're seeing coverage, but oftentimes the news, they're not giving us context. They're not giving us context, they're not telling us how we got here, they're just showing, this thing happened yesterday, or this thing happened today. So then people walk away thinking, because if that's how they're learning about it, they think, oh, racism happened that one time on that street over there, when that white person did that awful thing to that African-American unarmed male. Or racism happened that time that person called Lucretia the N-word. And so no, that's not what racism is. So it then gets misconstrued as an isolated incident. And that's not it. So we can't get our information just from the news. Honestly, it's not their job to educate us, right? Yeah, their job is to get us to watch their channel, right? So that's what they're doing. It should be to inform us, but we know that that's not always what's happening. Okay, and then my favorite one, I love this one, and I'm being sarcastic. I hate this one because this is where so many people are informed about race and racism and structural inequality is through political platforms, right? And so people will say, I'm not political, or I'm above politics, and then they will recite a political agenda of a particular party. That's right. Okay, and they will do that. And so I'm like, okay, I could totally tell where you're getting your information. So, oh shoot, I just lost my point. But anyway, it's like we can't be informed. It is not a politician's job or political party's job. It should be. They should have to be responsible and to educate, but they're not. It's not their job to educate us. What is their goal? Yes, to win, to get us to vote for them, right? So that can't be our only source of education. Will we do that for math? We would do that for math? No, like we really would, if we were struggling in math, we'd hire a tutor. We go to, one of my children had to go to Mathnasium. Has anybody heard of Mathnasium? Yeah, it's fun, but it's expensive, So yeah, so you do that. You do that, right? Go talk to the teacher, sit down. You don't say, well, let's call up President so-and-so or whoever. No, you don't. Let's call up our local politician, get some help for math. We don't do that. Okay. Then when we do decide, hey, maybe we should get some understanding. Maybe we should address this, because right now it's the popular thing to do, is to address this. So again, think about math. In your whole life, you're experiencing math, and you know nothing about it. Would you then hire a one-time guest speaker to come to an event and speak for 30 minutes on math and then think that everybody has mastered math? Would you do that? No. See, everybody's shaking their head. No, we would not do that. But that's what we do for race and racism. And then we think we're good. I went to this thing, check, I'm good. I call it the too little, too late talks. Too little, too late talks. And we're good. We want to check a box. I heard so-and-so speak that one time. I'm not racist. It's all good. Or I felt guilty. I'm good. Or I felt empowered. All is well. Okay? The other thing we do is have group discussions. And these are always very interesting to me, because especially in churches we do this. We say, let's take a white church and let's take a black church and let's come together. So two people who are already not doing life together, people who don't know each other, people who are not comfortable with each other, don't have a relationship, and we say, let's come together and sit around the table, and you bring some food and I bring some food, and let's have a conversation about this very complex, nuanced, probably most of you all have some trauma. We all do, actually. We all have trauma, and we sit in the wound of this trauma, and let's have a conversation about it and think that that's how we're going to fix it. Doesn't that sound like a great idea? No, and I definitely would not do that with math. You see, that doesn't make sense, right? And so typically, there's so much to be learned. But there's a little knowledge. I call that, people have a little bit of knowledge and a whole lot of fear. And we say, come and let's sit around the table and let's have a very hard discussions. And honestly, I haven't seen those. It's very rare that those go very well, unless it's a group that people already know each other, and so they already have a relationship. But when you bring people together and they don't know each other, there's so much fear. And even when I teach, I spend a lot of time trying to help diminish fear. And every now and then, we'll be on the final weeks and fear will rear up in someone. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, right, okay. So, and then you have debate, discussion. People don't know the difference between debate, discussion, and dialogue. So people bring people together and people want to debate. I still don't understand what the debate is regarding race and racism. So are you debating that there should be racism? I don't understand that. But anyway, so there's a whole debate thing. And with, yes, okay, I can go forward. There we go. My slide got out of order. Sorry about that. So when you have a debate is all about might is right. So debate is about who's winning. Okay, so in the game of racism, everybody loses. There are no winners, okay? Or discussion, and I know discussion sounds great because it sounds very democratic, but oftentimes with discussions, the noisier, the smarter. And so the person that talks the most is trying to show how smart they are. And typically with racism, it's like, I want to show you how not racist I am. I want to show you how woke I am. And so that's the person who is talking the most a lot. And again, in my own personal experience, usually the person who's talking the most knows the least. Yeah, okay, so some of y'all can relate. I thought it was just me, but that's my experience. Okay, but what we really want is dialogue, but dialogue requires some work. Dialogue requires some agreement and some intention, and some surrender, some humility, right? Because dialogue is about connectivity and building community. And so you have to have a goal. So now I got to go back to this. I don't know how I got my slide out of order. Apologize for that. Let's see, can I go backwards? Oh, yes. So in regards to, let's see if I can find my quote since my slide got out of order. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Psychotherapist Kim Honeycutt, she quoted or shared this quote by Dr. Stephen porches. And excuse me, because psychology is not my field. But she says polyvagal, that's a big word, say polyvagal. Yeah, okay, so there we can look that up later. Polyvagal research has revealed that how our nervous system interacts with our environment depends not just on the absence of threat, so we're talking about our nervous system, so it depends not just on the absence of threat, but the absence of nervous system perceived threat. Okay, so that's kind of deep, right? So essentially what that's saying is we're all gathered together, right? And we are feeling tense and fear, and we're smiling at each other, and we're like, let's solve this problem. Let's do this work. But we are terrified. And so what's gonna happen is you're gonna have walls up, you're not gonna build community, and you are definitely not gonna learn. You might get some information, and you might be able to digest a little bit of it, but transformation is not gonna happen, right? Because we don't have trust, we don't have a relationship, we don't have respect. We see that now, oh my gosh, so in this hot political climate. So you don't feel secure. One of the most interesting comments, I believe, and remember, you gotta remember, I'm an educator, okay? So I have a different perspective on how we should come together to learn. And so I'll hear this a lot. Let's get uncomfortable. We have to get uncomfortable and talk about race. And so I'm like, well, I don't know where y'all live, but where I live, people are already uncomfortable. Thank you. They're already uncomfortable, so we don't have to get uncomfortable. What about we get comfortable? Like, what about we normalize this so that you're comfortable? In my house, we're comfortable. And I'm married to a white man. I'm a black woman. And we have these brown girls. And we have conversations about race, ethnicity, politics, just like we talk about toys. Same tone. We don't have to put on deep music, sorrowful music, sit down, make some soup. Well, let me tell you, we don't have to do that. My children ask me a question, I answer, or I see something, we bring it up, and literally they go, okay, shrug off, and then go off to TikTok or whatever. Let's normalize it. Like, let's have language. Let's be comfortable with this. Okay, so ultimately, as the triangle says, the communication triangle says, we never get to truth. We never get to the truth, hearing the truth, expressing the truth of who we really are. Because we are just sitting in threat, right? So never with shame, guilt, fear, or rage, we are never going to learn, we're never going to heal, we're never going to restore anything. We can say we are, but when we sit in shame and guilt, fear, rage, trauma, we're just gonna sit there. Okay, let's see if I can get back on track. Goals. So dialogue is goal-oriented, okay? And so for our goals with the organization that I'm a part of, Brownicity, our goal is to use education as invitation to liberation. So when you come to a Brownicity event or you come to a Brownicity space, that's what our goal is. That's our heart. Ultimately, we want you to have the ability to make choices, and that will come through education. That's our offering, because we recognize that our institutions of education, schools and churches, have done us a disservice when it comes to teaching us about race and racism. They've done us a disservice in engaging us in a regular process. Like, again, think about math. 1, 2, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, algebra, whatever comes after that, geometry. But with race and racism, we're like, race is when you don't like somebody that look different than you. No. See? And we're grown people, right? We're grown people. Okay. So we want to give people a solid foundation. I love this saying. And how am I doing on time? I feel like I've been talking a long time. I'm good. I forgot to ask where the clock is. Oh, I'm good. Oh, there. Thank you. I think that's why and with such pleasant eyes, that's why I never saw the clock, because she's just like, her eyes. Okay. So, Okay, so now I'm off again. Okay, what was I saying? Solid foundation. Oh shoot, where was I going? There we go. I love this quote that says, mutually informed people seldom disagree. Okay, so, when we have similar understanding, again, just like math, you can talk about numbers here in the United States, and you can have that same conversation with somebody from a different country who speaks a different language, because we have this similar mutual understanding of math, right? And so oftentimes there's this fracture when it comes to understanding and coming up with solutions about race and racism, is because we're not mutually informed. We have this gap. And whenever we have a gap, what goes into the gap? Fear, opinions, whatever. Okay, so we want to give people a solid foundation to build on. I like to use this illustration of, when you were a little kid and maybe you still do it. I still like to do it now, is to connect the dots, 1 to the 2 to the 3. Like you do that, and by the time you get to whatever, 30, you've drawn a picture. There's a picture that emerged. And so ask yourself, was the picture already there before you connected the dots? It was already there. You just had to connect the dots, right? And so we need dots. We need the dots so we can connect the dots. You can't draw the picture if you only have 3 dots, right? You can't see the picture if you only have 3 dots. Okay, and then our other goal is to inspire a journey of transformation to undergird active anti-racism. And the key word there, honestly, which is not bolded, ironically, is journey, because it is a journey. Transformation is a journey. There is no, we get to a place where we're going, I'm not racist, or racism doesn't impact me. Like, it's a journey. I hope we will get there. But right now, it's a journey. Okay, and this is something I like to share, these goals that I put forth as an educator. Like, regardless of where you choose to learn, through what institution, or courses, or books, a group study on your own, your journey, your anti-racism journey, or any learning that is going to help you be able to understand the structural racial inequality. I call it has 2 parts, or it's 2 folds. You have to understand the construct, right? So I'll just say you have to understand the construct, and you have to have a critical lens. And so understanding the construct, there's you have to know the history there, right? So we don't start from today. We don't just start from where we are. We have to know how we got here. And so within the construct, we need to understand race, how race was created. This is the number one thing I hear. There's 2 things I always hear when I'm teaching this. People go, I thought race was biological. And people feel so disappointed, not that it's not biological, but that they didn't know that. This whole time, I thought those people were experiencing exploitation and oppression because they were biologically different, or those people were exploiting and pillaging because they are biologically different. So people don't know that it's not biological, and so you have to understand that. That has to be a part of your foundation in understanding how race and when it was created and why it was created. Let's go back to facts, figures, patterns, because then you will see the patterns play out over and over again. I'm so fortunate that I get to teach a high school class, and I love it. By mid school year, they know the patterns, and so I can present something to them, and I can say, now what's about to happen, and then they know the pattern, and even in the current. They understand, this is about to happen because this happened. Facts, figures, patterns. See, just like math. Okay, you have to know the narratives. We have to know the stories and how the stories changed. Why was it at one point Native Americans were just brown white people and we can get along? And then within 10 years, Native Americans were then savages and we have to take their land. They cannot be civilized. Why is that? And how do we see that happening today? We have to understand how regardless of, yes, we have a human genome project that lets us know that we are more alike than different, but people still hold on to stories and narratives that tell a different story and how they have impacted us. And policies. This is what I love about teaching anti-racism, is that there are receipts. Because up until recently, it was all fine. So people wrote it down. So all you gotta do is you can look at the Constitution. You can pull up the policies, the laws. You can pull up, what are those things for the neighborhood? What is that called? The neighborhood, anybody know? Okay, covenant, that's what it is. Yes, thank you, brain. You can pull those up, all those things, bylaws, covenant, it says it, Negroes not allowed. We suspect a Negro invasion or a Latinx, Hispanic invasion. It's all written down. People wrote it down. There was no hiding it. Dog whistle politics, that's new. And it's actually kind of gone out of style right now, right? Some of y'all know. But it's all written down. So you got to know the policies. And we have so much of what we have, rich, poor, working class. We have so much of this because of policies, not just because of how we look. Okay, you got to know that construct. And then you have to have a critical lens. And that's something that oftentimes we aren't encouraged in our American culture, is to be analytical and to be introspective. And so you need a lens to look out and do an analysis, and we call it it's called a power analysis, to be able to connect the dots to see how things got the way they do and how they continue to operate. And then we want to have a lens to look inward, because this is baked in us too. We're a product of it. And we have to be able to find this within ourselves so that we don't continue to be a cog in the wheel. Okay? Oh, this is my favorite, one of my favorite illustrations, because it tells an amazing story. I'm telling you, my slides are just all cattywampus today. I don't know. It tells an incredible story just in this one illustration. And so this is not simply a picture of hatred or discrimination. So sometimes when I show this to people who have had no education on race and racism, they don't even know 1, 2, 3, they don't know, So they look at that and I get the response, well, slavery did happen a long time ago, because that's a little overwhelming to people. So they deflect. I don't want to see that, because it feels horrible. And then some people are really honest. They go, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. But this is not simply a picture of hatred or discrimination. This is the story of a complex system of social inequality evolving one group having power to carry out systemic discrimination through the major institutions of society, like government, courts of law, banks, schools, public policies, institutional practices, cultural representations, and other norms that work to perpetuate racial group inequality. This is a picture of hierarchical arrangement of racialized groups. It's a picture of social and institutional power plus white supremacy. But again, when you know the facts and the figures and the patterns, right, and you consider ourselves as powerful beings, made in the image of the Creator, who spoke and turned chaos to a consonance, turned chaos into a well-ordered harmony. We are endowed with that, right? That's the substance that we're made of. So when I look at this picture, I see hope. I look at where we are, and I see that we are positioned and postured and poised for this moment. I look at this picture and I see an opportunity, right? We can turn this around. Or actually, we don't want to turn it around. We can transform it, dismantle it, make it better. We get to do that. Coming on around the corner here. So with that, I will say, may we be the sacred learning spaces, the garden to be curated. May we cultivate and normalize learning. May we learn to learn. One of the passages that I'm so inspired by is Romans 12:2. And it says, do not allow this world to mold you in its own image. Instead, be transformed from the inside out by renewing your mind. So this is calling us to a process of renewing our mind. This is calling us to a learning process to rewire. We are neuroplasticians. We don't have to be the products of our upbringing, right? We can think about the way we think, and then we can rethink. We can learn and unlearn. And it says, as a result, you'll be able to discern what God wills and whatever God finds good and pleasing. And essentially that means you'll have God's mind, right? Some of us, we don't have answers because we're functioning in a way that, in the way we've been patterned to function by the world, right? We're a part of the system. But what if we come out of the system, right? And then we get God's mind. We know how God thinks. We align ourselves with God's design, right? So your action steps, see, I tried to be cute and I did act like A. See what I did there? We want to access learning. And the word access is actually a means of approaching or entering a place or a space. May we enter this space of learning. May we make it normal. Cultivate a learning community. Let's invite others to the learning space, all right? So that means, like, you're learning and you're inviting people to learn with you versus you're learning and then judging people who are not. See, there's a difference, right? Mm-hmm. And then finally, we want to teach the children. That's my favorite, is to teach the children, because the children can be different. Like, we don't want the children to be where we are. Like, I often hear, people who, they'll say, I'm 40 or I'm 50 or I'm 60. And why am I just now knowing this? They feel robbed. They feel hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray. Y'all know where I'm going with that. They do. But our children, we don't have to do that to our children. Okay, so I want to invite you, of course, to join our learning community. We have a table out there, Brownicity, Many Hues, One Humanity, and I'm down to my last few seconds. So I will tell you more about that. If you come to our table, we have some books. We have some authors on our team, and you get to hear from one of them later today, Dr. Marti. And so his book is on our table. My curriculum and study guide is on our table. And then we have a book by Pastor Dan Berry, who is one of our star students who took this course, who took our course, has been on this journey, and then he's wrote a book about it because it changed his life. So you want to check that out as well. And we have some offers for you. And so I will close. If you've ever taken a Brownicity course or if you've ever been a part of any event we've done, this is our intention and our benediction. So if you know it, say it with me. May we be people of peace with voices of hope doing the hard work of love. Oh, that felt so good. Thank you.
Thank you. We have questions. We have questions for you. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't know about that. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Berry, so much. That was wonderful. I should have gotten a picture of the ending. I'll get it from you later. Okay. I love that. Okay, so we have 2 questions for you.
Sure.
One is like a part A and a part B.
Okay.
So how do we get comfortable 1A. And then 1B would be, what is your advice when you are in a space where people appear comfortable with the racial status quo?
Ooh, okay, so we get comfortable, again, education, the more you know and the more you make it your own, like you're comfortable with math because you have been immersed in it. So I say consciousness plus competence equals confidence. So, say it again. Consciousness plus, see, it's math. Confidence plus, consciousness plus competence equals confidence. So make this your thing, like anything. And then the other one was when you are.
What is your advice when you are in a space when people appear comfortable with the racial status quo? Like they don't want to grow past where we are now. What is your advice?
Right. Okay. So really, there's not a lot you can do about that because if people don't want to learn, they're not ready. So my advice is, you use yourself to be this learning space and this learning vessel. So I always tell people you have to throw your own self under the bus, and that requires vulnerability and humility. And so you would say, I used to think this. And this should be with people you have a relationship with, because if you don't have a relationship with them, it's not going to work.
Okay.
But I used to think this, and then I learned this, or now I'm learning this, and now I'm doing this or reconsidering this. So you share your own journey of evolving and growing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. All right, last question with math. What is the equivalent?
Oh, dear.
Right. Anti-racism learning process of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, algebra, geometry, and calculus.
So what is the equivalent?
Yeah.
So
what is the equivalent of all of those things? Like what would be the steps? You gave the example of counting and
Right. So again, like I would say, you would take a beginner's course. So I'll just use my course, for example. So we start with some very simple things to understand. And I kind of wrote that out with those 5 goals. Like they're not only goals, but they're also steps. And so you want to learn history first. History first. I know sometimes people want to do like ethnic studies first or white fragility first or whatever, but like no, history first. So you want to learn history. You want to learn how race was created, and then you start learning about the narratives. Then you learn about policies. And once you have that, and it's called scaffolding. So you build.
Are we able to control slides in the back? Can we get that slide back up so if anybody wants to take a picture who has this question? I don't know if we can control it, but.
Okay. Then.
Cherish, take a picture for me.
Okay.
All right.
or I can reshare it. It's the one with the 5 goals, and then you want to make sure that you understand how it has all worked together. So then that's the power analysis part. So again, you can't do power analysis before you understand these other things, that's the problem. Like a lot of people come to the conversation up here trying to do power analysis and work on very complex and nuanced things, but they don't know the history. They don't know how we got there. So history, which involves the science or the fake science and the narratives, you got to know the policies. Then you do the structural analysis, and then you find yourself in that story. And that's the model we use. And I have found that is the path of least resistance and most success.
That's good.
That one.
That's good.
Is that good?
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Berry. Can we give her one more hand? This is great.